Computer. All right. So Nirra and I are here again on Zoom, and we're talking about real estate and real estate investing. We're actually picking up from our last session, and Nirra's in Paris. Before I forget, Nirra, it's only an hour and 20 minutes to Nice by plane. And I doubt you'll have any time after the Olympics, but if you did, it might be worthwhile visiting the Mortoglu Academy, the tennis academy. It's an incredible academy. You remember I showed it to
Hmm.
you?
Yeah, you did the tennis one. It was a
Yeah,
beautiful thing.
I'm just going to show you one more time to entice you. I mean, imagine, a basketball academy run by you and maybe some other
Hmm.
people that looks like this. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. You had to have a lot of money to do that.
So it's an hour and 20 minutes, and flights in Europe are not as expensive as they are in Canada. Canada's pretty expensive.
Yeah, I know. Once you're in Europe, it's pretty cheap.
So it's an hour and 20 minutes south of Paris by plane. And I know three people at the academy. I'm just saying, if you wanted an introduction, an e-introduction to them, I could do that.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I would like to know how they started that process.
And what would be the key questions that you would ask them?
Um, One, how did he find such a beautiful location, and then how do you get the funding
Say that
to?
again. Say it again.
How did he find the beautiful location? Because that's a really
Yeah.
nice location.
Yeah.
And then how did he go about getting the funding to create all of the facilities?
Yeah. So one of the answers to the questions that I'm sure they're going to say, one of the answers will be they had one of the most famous tennis coaches in the world to build this around.
Hmm.
He was, I think,
So the
Serena Williams' coach for 20 years. And if you're
Oh
coaching
wow.
somebody like Serena, that puts you on the map. So attracting funding, if your last name is Fields or your last name is Williams, or you're coaching somebody like Nirra or Serena, that makes a difference. So
Right.
I look for it. Won't be today, but tomorrow I'll e-introduce you to the three people at Mortoglu Academy that I know. Do you speak any French?
Oui, je parle un petit peu le français.
Okay, because they speak English, but if you speak some French, you know what French people are like.
Yeah, I know.
They love their language more than they love each other.
Right, I hear that.
Yeah, I'm sure you know that. All right, so let's pick up where we left off last time. So we were on what I think is number seven, and that is to find yourself a good real estate attorney. And there are lots of attorneys who say they're real estate attorneys, but they're really not. They're really housing attorneys. So they know how to sort of close or complete a transaction to buy a house. But for what you want
Hmm.
to do, let's say you were going to set up a basketball academy or you're going to buy a multi-res, you need a real estate attorney, real estate lawyer who understands investment property. It's very different. Okay, so that's number seven on my list. It might be eight or nine on your list. The next thing you need is you need a mortgage broker. I don't have to tell you that when you apply to a bank for financing, they put you through the ringer. They'll have 50 to 100 questions for you to answer. They may take 3 or 4 months to actually respond. And if you had to do, say, visits to 2 or 3 or even 4 banks, you could spend dozens, if not hundreds of hours doing that. So if you have a good mortgage broker who understands investment property, he or she is gold because they can do one application, one credit score, and then they can submit your application to 12 funders with one button. So it would be impossible for you to do that. And in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, they get paid by the lender or the bank, not you. All right. So if you find a good mortgage broker, and even if you have to pay them yourself, which I often do, they will save you literally hundreds of hours of work and dozens of frustrating no's.
Hmm.
It really is something. So that would be the next on my list. The next I would look for is somebody who is a building inspector. You notice I didn't say home inspector.
Mhm.
And the reason for that is you want, again, there are people who can inspect a home and say, oh, look, this home looks like it has some water infiltration problems, or, the soffits probably need to be replaced. That's very useful if you're buying a home. But if you're buying an investment property, it's completely different.
Mhm.
There could be structural issues and many other things that come up in commercial investment that a typical home inspector just he or she, they're not qualified. So you want a building inspector that you can trust. Okay. Um, Next, you want to make sure that you have on your team, and this is probably one of the most difficult things to find, you want to have a contractor and a renovator and trades that you can trust. I have contractors and trades that have worked for me for 25 years. And when I want to build something, my wife wanted a little bunkie in our backyard. I just call up my contractors, my renovators, my mechanical, electrical guys, my plumbers. Actually, I don't do it. My project manager does it. And we just tell them, go in the backyard and, build whatever my wife is asking for. And they bill me on what's called time and materials. All right. So it's not a fixed price. It's just time and material. So let's say I was an electrician and I come on site and I do 6 hours worth of work and I'm just making up the number, I'm charging $60 an hour. So he would charge me $360 for his time. And then maybe he had some wiring he needed to do, and he bought some wiring and some circuits or whatever else. Maybe he has $40 or $50 worth of materials. And he'll just give me, at the end of the week, he'll give me an invoice which says, here are the hours I worked, here's the materials I bought, you owe me $1,000. And I pay my contractors every Friday. And some people tell me that that's a kind of a dumb way to do things, because they could overbill me, right? I can't go around with a stopwatch making sure that they were there for 6 hours, right? Maybe they were there for 5.5 hours and they billed 6 hours. I won't know that. But the other alternative is to always ask for a fixed price. And I'm not saying that's wrong. It's just that might well be the best way to go about it for you. But I just wanted to raise with you the two different, there's many different approaches, but the two main approaches are time and materials and fixed price. And on fixed price, here's what often happens with a fixed price contract. In construction, unfortunately, no matter how good your plans are, there are always a lot of unknowns. You can't know everything in advance. You can't. So when you ask for a fixed price contract, many contractors, many of the trades and subtrades will build in a big fudge factor, right? So maybe the electrician would have worked and billed me $1,000 for that work. But if I asked him for a quote in advance, he might have put in $1,300 just in case it takes him more time or the materials cost a bit more. So I have found, at least in my experience, certainly on smaller jobs and jobs where there are a lot of unknowns, I find time and materials with trusted people is better than a fixed price contract. If you're getting a fixed price contract, then just to hold them to account, you want to get at least 3 quotes. And you can pick the lowest one. All right. So those are the two main ways of hiring trades. The next thing is going to be a bit of a disappointment for you. It is for me. You remember, Nirra, I taught 14 years at the School of Architecture at Carleton University. And I really like architects and I respect the art of architecture. I do. They are artists. But In terms of the animation stuff that I'm trying to teach you and that you're learning from me, architects don't know anything about that. Many architects, maybe even most of them, want the building to look pretty. And that's great. I'm all in favor of pretty buildings because even in real estate, the brand matters. If you have a multi-residential building and it's a beautiful building from the outside, you will attract better tenants. You will. It just is the way it goes. I mean, let's say you have a rundown building, some of the glass is broken, some of the doors don't actually close properly, the grass has never been cut, there's garbage all over the place hasn't been painted forever, the roof is leaking. What kind of tenants are you going to attract? Probably people who can't afford to pay the rent. If you have a beautiful looking building and it's got a great brand, you're much more likely to attract tenants. And this is just as true in commercial or industrial as it is in residential. So I'm with the architecture profession when it comes to pretty. Brand does matter. Having said that, they have no idea how to make a building profitable. They don't. I'm just generalizing. I'm sure there's some architects who do, but most of them do not. And so most of the ideas for any kind of renovation that you're doing, any kind of new construction you're doing, any of those ideas that you want to implement to improve your both your guest experience or your apartment resident experience and your bottom line, those ideas are going to come from you. Why it is that architects still to this day, for example, when they're designing a 2-bedroom apartment, give no thought to where the home office is. They don't. Oh, they just said, well, you can use the dining room table. Well, that's dumb. You know, how many people do you know work from home today? At least part of the time. I bet you 50% of people who could work from home are working from home, you know, at least some of the time. And so when you design an apartment, you're going to find a niche somewhere where at least you could put some kind of a desk and a computer and some speakers and a few other things so that it's not necessarily in your bedroom on your bed doing this, which is fine when you're 25, but when you're 72, that's not going to work, right? So some of the very simple animation ideas that I teach: have a home office, have a backyard workshop, have a backyard office, have a backyard bunkie. You know, all these very simple things that you would think that the architecture profession should be concerned with, they don't really know much about it. And it can make a big difference to the return on investment. And the ROI, it comes from a number of different areas. Obviously, getting more rent, but also having tenants who pay more rent and stay longer is useful. Because every time a tenant moves out, Nirra, as you know, it doesn't matter whether it's commercial, industrial, or residential, it's all the same. When a tenant moves out, maybe the apartment has to be repainted. Maybe there's a 2-week period or even a month where it's not rented. If you change tenants every year and you lose a month's rent every year and you have to repaint and clean up the apartment every year, that gets pretty expensive. So I really want you to think about all this animation stuff that I talk about and not take any BS from your architect or your contractor or your renovator. Oh, well, we don't do things like that. Yeah, we do. Like I just rented one of my small apartments to a young woman. She'd probably be your age. And she's a registered massage therapist. She makes about $50,000 a year as an RMT. You probably know what an RMT is. You probably get some massage therapy, right? Yeah. So what do you think the first thing I asked her was?
How much does she make?
Say it again.
What her income is, her salary.
So the first thing I asked her is, would you ever consider running your own registered massage therapy practice? Oh, she said, I don't know. Well, I said, we've got, in this particular location, we've got a beautiful workshop in the backyard. It happens to be empty. And I've got a yoga instructor. I've got a cleaning lady. I've got a few others. I've got a woman who makes handmade soaps. I've got a guy who does some carpentry. All of them in apartments that my wife and I own, working in these small workshops, basically the backyard workshops. And she hasn't yet agreed. She's rented the apartment, but she hasn't yet agreed to do it. But I'll bet you she will. She's full of beans, that young woman. And, you know, virtually everybody who has done that. Oh, and I've got a hairdresser who used to make some money working for somebody else. Now she has her own home studio as a hairdresser. She makes between $10,000 and $11,000 a month. That's pretty good. As running her own practice, her own hair salon, home studio. So most of the people that I coach, who are also my tenants sometimes, are breaking six figures, and some doing very, very well. In fact, all of them, I think, so far. So she might do that. So all of these animation ideas, doesn't matter whether it's a five-story apartment building or it's just a little duplex or triplex, those are going to come from you, not anybody else, not from your realtor, not from your lawyer, your accountant, or your architect. Okay? Sorry to drill down on that, but it's one of my pet peeves. All right. Okay, next. If you do any sort of new construction, you are going,
So number 11 was be your own architect.
yes, yes, architect. And sometimes they're designers, architect designers. Again,
So find one or be your own.
yeah, you want to find one, but you want to find one who will follow your instructions. You're the boss.
Okay.
Many architects think that they're the boss and they know everything. Well, they know a lot about building pretty buildings, but they don't know much about utility. That's going to come from you. So they have to listen. And if they don't listen, you have to replace them with somebody else.
Okay.
You are the boss. It's your money. It's your future. Once they have
Hmm.
finished helping you with a renovation or a new building, they go on. But you're stuck with it. All right. I'll give you an example. One of my buildings, I had a large commercial space in a small town on a main street that had been vacant for a long time. What I did was I wanted to put an apartment in the back and make the commercial space smaller. And I have an apartment here and a commercial space here. So a smaller commercial space and a one-bedroom apartment here. My architect said, "Oh, you can't do that. The local planning system doesn't allow you to have apartments on the ground floor." I said, "Well, too bad. I'm going to apply to the city's committee of adjustment. It's a committee of the city, and I'm going to ask for their permission to have an apartment in the back." And he said, "Oh, can we do that?" I said, "Yeah, we're going to." So we applied to the committee of adjustment for permission to put the apartment in behind the commercial space, make the commercial space smaller. And we got that permission, no problem at all. It wasn't expensive to do, it was quick. So we put a one-bedroom apartment here, and we have, in fact, we have another young woman who runs a wedding gown and a prom gown business. She runs prom gowns and wedding gowns. So young girls really in high school will come and buy their prom dress from her. And then a few years later, they'll come back and buy a wedding dress, right? And she lives in the apartment in behind, and she works here. It's fantastic. And so it rented just like that. So even when the planner at the local city or town says, "Oh no, Nirra, you can't do that." Well, you say, "Well, why not? Let's do it. Let's find a way." Because again, what's the point of having a nice commercial space that stays vacant for 3 years? I'd rather have an apartment that rents right away and a smaller store that rents right away, and you get that live work thing. It worked beautifully. It worked so well. I did it again in the same building. All right. So one of the things that my dad taught me, and you could write this on our list, don't take no for an answer. I mean, great basketball coaches don't scheme to lose. They scheme to win. I'm sure your coach is pretty focused on having a game plan. All right. Okay, so the next one on my list is engineering and other consultants. So when you are doing a new building or you're renovating an existing one, you're going to need a whole list of consultants. All right, so you're going to need somebody, an engineer who will do structural. So let's say you have a building where there's a structural failure. So you're going to need a structural engineer. You might need a soils engineer. What the hell is a soils engineer? A soils engineer means, let's say you're building an addition at the back of your property. You want to make sure that the soil bearing capacity can actually carry that new structure. So you need a soils engineer. You need a structural engineer. You need a mechanical engineer. Mechanical engineer, that's for your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. You're going to need an electrical engineer to make sure that your electrical system is properly sized and won't cause fire, right? So there's a lot of consultants in this industry, and they're expensive. All right, so I wanted to add that. You're going to need, this is, I don't know if it's 14 or something like that, you're going to need a private planner. So, I've done so much of this work that, for example, when I wanted to go to the Committee of Adjustment for approval to put a ground floor apartment in one of our buildings, I represented myself. Okay? I didn't need a lawyer to do that. I didn't need a planner to do that. I'm able to do it myself. But for somebody who's your age and is just new in the business, you would hire, in my opinion, you would hire a private planner to represent you. You would go to the hearing yourself. You might say hello, but other than that, you don't really say much, but your planner will speak for you. But at some point, as you get more experience, you might say, well, I'll just do it myself, because many of these committees are just made up of ordinary people like you and me. And you can usually talk to them without too much trouble and explain what you'd like to do, and they will listen. But if it's very technical, you need a planner. And they're a little cheaper than the engineers, and they're a lot cheaper than the lawyers. Lawyers are expensive. So planner, then you might need a surveyor. That's the next on your list, surveyor. And the reason you need a surveyor is, don't do what I did. I was doing a new subdivision. I don't know, we had about 50 lots in the subdivision, and they were big lots. It was a rural subdivision. I think each lot was at least 2 acres. And it's rural, so there were no municipal services. There were no piped water or piped sewer. So you put a well in and you put a septic system in. Well, I knew where the lot boundaries were, so I said to my well driller, I need a well here and I need a well here. And I pointed them out, and I spray painted, or I put stakes in the ground where the wells were going to go for the new houses. I didn't call my surveyor to lay it out because I knew where the boundaries were. Well, it turns out I didn't. I ended up with 2 wells on one property. That's a $5,500 mistake. It costs about $5,500 to drill a well. And obviously I had to cap the well, and I called the surveyors, like, could you please put it in the proper location? So if you're putting up a fence, or you're putting up a new addition to something, or you're building a new building, or you're putting in a well, you call the surveyors. All right? Don't do what I did. Okay, next on my list, and this is relatively new. I think you want to find yourself a good project manager. Doesn't really matter what the project is. Whether you're buying a multi-res building, or, I don't know, you're doing the basketball house like we talked about last time. There are so many details in putting together a business, and certainly putting together a building, that I've come to the conclusion that most of my clients, and I've got about almost 2,600 clients now, most of my clients, including yours truly, need a project manager. A project manager, you probably know what that is. A project manager, he or she is responsible for every single activity in a project. Do you know what critical path scheduling is? Okay. Critical path scheduling was invented by, I don't remember the guy's name, but it was invented in World War II. The United States had a project called Project Manhattan, the Manhattan Project, which was to build an atomic bomb. They were hoping to build it before the Germans did or the Japanese did. And there were about 3,000 companies involved in building the first atomic bomb and about 300,000 people. And the scientists and managers of the Manhattan Project had no idea how you coordinate 3,000 companies and 300,000 workers. They just didn't know how to do it. So some guy invented something called critical path methodology. And what that is you lay out each task. So you know, in the case of the Manhattan Project, they probably had 500,000 things they had to do. But in the case of a typical, I don't know, building say a shopping mall, you probably have, you know, I don't know, 200 tasks, not 500,000, yeah, a few hundred. And so every task is listed, and how many days or weeks that task is going to take to complete is estimated. And then they know what has to happen first and then happen second, third, and fourth. I'll give you an example. If you were building a house, say you were building a triplex, you can't put up the walls until your foundation is in. You can't put your foundation in until you've done the excavation, right? So you've got excavation, then you pour the footing and foundation. Then you can build the walls. Then you can put the roof on. Then you can brick it, right? I mean, it's simple stuff like that. Then you go inside, you do the electrical and the mechanical, then you drywall it, and then everything else. So in putting together a duplex or triplex, you probably have 25 or 30 trades to coordinate, okay? Not 3,000. But a critical path schedule is even for building a house, or even if you're just doing a renovation, just putting in a basement apartment. You have a project manager who runs your schedule for you, sets out the schedule. And the reason it's called critical path is that there will be some tasks that you have to do that if that task is delayed, the whole project is delayed. For example, if you were building a triplex and you can't get your roofer on site, right? Until you have your roof secured, you can't wrap your building. Until you can, you know, enclose the building, you can't put your electrical in, your mechanical in, you certainly can't put any drywall in or any finishes, right? So your roof, for example, is usually a critical part, a critical element, right? So a project manager working for you, the owner, Nirra, runs that schedule. And he or she can tell you when you're on time, when you're not on time, when you're over budget, where you're under budget. It's very important. And most people try and do it themselves and they make a mess. All right. Next, find a good appraiser. If you don't mind unmuting yourself, I'm sure you know why a good appraiser is important.
Yeah, I know.
Have you ever done an appraisal on a building?
No, but I heard about it.
Was that a no?
No, I haven't.
All right, let me just, I'll quickly show you one. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Oops, sorry, I shared the wrong screen. All right, so this is an appraisal. This is done by a company that I really like these people, McLean, Simon and Associates. This was done by a young woman by the name of Rebecca Simon. She is a commercial appraiser. And she did this appraisal on one of our multi-residential buildings. And what they do is, in her case, she did a current market value assessment. So what is the fair market value of our building today? And when we finally finish it, it's not quite finished, what's it going to be worth after we finish the last of the renovations, right? So you can see number 1 and number 2 on the screen, right? Okay. And so she came up with a value for that building when it's as it sits now, it's about 92, 93% finished. She estimated it's worth about 5.65 million. And when we finish the last little bit, it goes up a lot to about 6.8 million. These appraisal reports are quite long. This one is 24 pages, but I've seen appraisals that are, 40 or 50 pages long. What they include, obviously, the appraiser goes and does a site visit. They take lots of photographs. So these are some of the photographs. And then they go into a lot of detail on the building. So it isn't just for mortgage purposes. I'm going to stop sharing now. It isn't just for mortgage purposes. It's also to know how we're doing, if you know what I mean. We're spending money on this building, renovating it, bringing it up to code, doing some structural repairs, doing some of the stuff that I talked about, putting an apartment at grade and making the commercial space smaller. So it's it helps us obviously with financing. We give that to our lender. The lender says, well, that's good. And then they give us a few $1 million to help us along. But it also is like a report card. It's like when you were in grade school and you got an A on something. Maybe you said to mom and dad, hey, I got an A, right? Or if that appraisal had come in instead of at 5.6 million, it had come in at 4.6 million, I'd have thrown myself off a bridge, right? So it's like a report card too, and it's a history. So, these documents are something that I keep on my computers. I back them up. And, when my kids inherit whatever, at least they'll have some record of what we've done, right? And if we sell the building, they'll have a record of what we've done. Okay? Finding a good appraiser is not easy. And you want to find somebody, again, who understands investment property. And let me give you another example of how difficult it is. How much more time do we have? I don't want to overstay my welcome here.
Oh no, I think we have like 20 minutes, 23 minutes. We're good.
Yeah. All right. So I'll try and I want to get through at least this part. Okay. And I'm going to see you when you get back. So I'll give you an example. One of my young clients runs a company called All Around Fencing, very successful fencing and deck company. They sell millions of dollars worth of fences and decks every year. He has a beautiful home worth about $1 million in the rural area of Ottawa. $1 million in Ottawa is a lot. In Toronto, it's not, but in Ottawa, it's a lot. So he has $1 million home, and he built himself a 1,600 square foot workshop in the backyard. And he paid cash for it, and it was probably a $200,000 workshop. It's beautiful. And he uses it for his company. And then he wanted to get it reappraised. So the appraiser shows up at the door, and Alex calls me and says, Bruce, the appraiser's here. And he tells me he can't even look at the workshop in my backyard. He said he's not allowed by the bank to look at anything other than the main building. So I said, Alex, here's what you're going to do. You're going to fire this guy now. Don't let him in your house. It's useless. You've improved the property with a $200,000 workshop, and he's not prepared to look at it. I said, just tell him to go home and save yourself, $500 or $600. So he did that. He fired the guy. And what we did was we worked with a different bank who understood this kind of animation stuff that I talk a lot about. And the next appraiser was given permission by the lender to assess the house and the workshop. All right. And which makes sense to me, right? Because now when you're talking residential, when you have a workshop, it's really not residential anymore. It's kind of a mixed use property, right? It's commercial and residential. And so some of the banks and some of the lenders are beginning to understand that more and more people are working from home. More and more people are using their homes as home offices and backyard workshops and all this. So they're starting to understand more of the commercial aspects of quote unquote home appraisals. So you need to know, and with your mortgage broker and you're a realtor, you need to know which lenders will do that, because otherwise you could be just like Alex. You have $1 million property, you build a $200,000 addition, and the lender says, well, we'll give you zero value for that. That affects the amount of money you can get on your mortgage, right? Okay, so that's important. All right, let's keep going. One of the things, my real job description is file clerk. I'm a file clerk. That's my real job description. And so I want you to write as on your list of things, you are the file clerk. File clerk. I mean it. I keep digital copies of just about everything. Surveys, building permits, building permit applications, photographs. I mean, I keep digital files. I mean, I've got digital files on you now, lots of them. And I keep, of course, on my own properties, I have exhaustive files. And as a real estate broker as well, I'll get a call from a lawyer like 2 or 3 days before we're supposed to close the transaction. Oh, I think there was an amendment to the agreement. I can't find it. Where's the waiver of conditions? I can't find the survey. Lawyers are hopeless, at least in my experience, hopeless at keeping their digital files straight, or even their paper files. And so they're always coming to me. So I have some notes here. You can see these are handwritten notes. I don't know if you can see them, but these are handwritten notes that I put together, because I knew we were going to have this session today. But believe it or not, I'll scan these notes in and I'll put them in your file so I can look back. And what did we talk about, on July 11th, 2024? I can look at that 2 years from now. So when I talk to you in 2 years, say, or 3 years from now, I might look back and I might say, oh, I remember you were in Paris at the Olympics, and I remember all kinds of things that we talked. I didn't remember any of that, but my computer did. All right, that gives you a lot of power. Information is power. Okay, we're almost done. All right. Next, get yourself, as soon as you're able to, a good bookkeeper. Right? Maybe you're good at keeping your books. I am terrible. I have a bookkeeper and she keeps me going. Without her, I'd be lost. And to me, an accountant is important, but a bookkeeper is even more important. First of all, a bookkeeper charges $40 an hour, not $300 or more an hour. So the bookkeeper charges $40 or $45 an hour, the accountant $300, $400, $500 an hour, whatever. But your bookkeeper then can track everything. She or he can do your HST returns, your income tax. They can't do the corporate income tax, but they can do personal income tax. They can just help you in so many ways. Again, they're worth their weight in gold. So I would definitely want I would definitely want to do that. Okay, so that's the list of the people I think that are key to your success. Where do you want to go next?
I guess I would want to, so we did 20 points. I guess like what's most like if we were to have like a time frame, say after Olympics, what would be the time frame and what would be the most important, I guess, tips on this 20 tip list to start with to get the ball rolling? Because that's for
So
me, that's probably the most important
the
thing.
most important thing, I think, for you and me is to decide what it is what you're going to buy first. Like we've talked about some ideas, some of the ideas I suggested you didn't like very much. One of which was, the basketball house, and you didn't want to babysit kids. That looks like that was a strikeout by me.
Hmm.
But your idea maybe to rent some warehouse space and turn it into, a basketball academy. I mean, you have a number of ideas. You also like the multi-res idea, right? So there are a number of ideas going around in your mind. It's the number one thing when you work with me is, what is Nirra's business model? In other words,
Okay, so
that's the number one thing, because
so
if you decided you wanted to do, say, the basketball house, that's a completely different group of advisors that you need and investors than if you're going to buy, say, a multi-res building, or you're going to do the warehouse thing and the basketball academy, So, you have to sort of think in your mind, what am I passionate about? What do I want to spend the next 3 years of my life doing? And then I'm going to help you do that. But you've got to think about what it is that you want to do first.
Yeah, so I think that you're more focused on the personal business and I'm more focused on the real estate. So I did want to be get more into the real estate and then do the business. But it seems like you want to do the business first and then
No,
build a
no,
portfolio.
it's not, what I want has nothing to do with this. I am your coach. I want to do and help you do what it is you want to do. So what is it that on the real estate side that you want to do?
So I just want to start the portfolio. So whether that's house hacking, a multi-res, like a triplex or a duplex, I'm okay with that to start it. And then also, I'm also going to do the business part as well. But I just wanted to start the portfolio because I don't have one currently.
So
And
I
then,
now that's fine. All right, I'm going to write that down. Okay, so start the portfolio. My turn to write stuff down. Okay. Start the portfolio.
mhm.
Is this, would you consider, let's say you bought a triplex, would you consider living in one of the units?
Yeah, for a short term, maybe a year or two,
That's fine.
like a like a house hack situation,
I beg your pardon?
like a house hack situation.
House hack.
That's the term they use, right? Where
Yeah,
you like,
yeah, that's good. That's good. So I love that term, a house hack. So what if you wanted to buy, what if you wanted to find a duplex or a triplex? And
sorry, it's loud.
um, what if you wanted to find a duplex or a triplex? You would be a first-time buyer?
Yes, it would be first time.
First-time buyer, okay. That's important because a first-time buyer, I think, only needs to put down 5%.
Even in Toronto, without. So if you put down five, do you have to buy a mortgage insurance?
That was my next question. Does it have to be Toronto? I mean, maybe it does.
Uh, Ideally, I would live in Toronto. I wouldn't live anywhere else.
So you want to live in Toronto.
Yeah, I know the housing market is crazy here.
Yeah. Well, one of my daughters, probably again about your age, maybe a bit younger, she and her husband, bought a duplex. And my daughter is quite senior now in the insurance business, and she works in downtown Toronto, but they bought a house in Whitby.
Oh, Whitby, yeah, that's the hour from here.
It's an hour, yeah. But she only has to go to the office twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and she gets on the GO train, and it takes her about 50 minutes to get downtown and 50 minutes home. So it's not too bad, and it's only twice a week. And but to buy a duplex in Toronto, they looked at some. They were in the $2 to $3 million range. They bought a very
Yes.
they bought a very nice duplex in Whitby for 805,000.
Oh, wow. That's cheap.
Well, I don't know if it's cheap or not, but it's a hell of a lot less than one of the ones they looked at was 2.7 million. And I said to Rachel and her husband Pat, and now they have a little baby. I said, how long does it take to pay off $2.7 million? So they have a nice place in Whitby. So they have a house, and then at the lower level they have a 2 bedroom apartment which they rent out. So and they were lucky they bought it when mortgage rates were around 2%. So they have a pretty high mortgage. They had about $150,000 saved up. So their mortgage is about $650,000. But at 2%, that's only $13,000 a year in interest, right?
Mhm.
And of course they pay some principal on top of that, and they can rent the apartment, downstairs apartment is quite nice. They rent that for about $2,100 or $2,200 a month. So they basically living in their own home for free. But next year, their mortgage is up for renewal. So I told them it's not going to be 2%. But
Right.
I just think that um, listen, this is up to you. You have to tell me what it is you want to do. But if you wanted to buy a property in Toronto, that's going to be more difficult.
Oh, because of the market?
Yeah, because of the cost.
Okay, so definitely wouldn't be. So I guess being that if I did want to buy one in Toronto, like a multi-residence, what would I have to make an income to be able to get a mortgage for that?
Well, it isn't just being able to get a mortgage. It's also that you want to make sure, Nira, that you're not losing money every month.
Hmm.
Like, let's say you bought a triplex in Toronto and you were able to finance it. Great. But what if you're losing $3,000 a month on it?
Oh yeah, definitely. But that goes into like finding the right property.
I agree. I'm not saying it's impossible, but investment property in Toronto is extremely difficult. It really is. I'm just trying to think of a
What,
way to do it that makes sense.
so what about the US? Because I did have my eyes on the US.
Well,
Cleveland is
yeah,
actually 3 hours from me by car, and I used to live in Cleveland. My uncle lives in Cleveland.
your uncle lives in Cleveland.
Yeah, I used to live there.
Huh? Um, so you would find it much easier to find a triplex in Cleveland that
Hmm.
makes sense than one in Toronto.
Hmm.
All right, and now, do you talk to your uncle on a regular basis?
Yeah, we're super close. I talk to him on a regular basis. I used to live with him. I still go back and visit him, so
What
I
is
still have a
it?
lot.
What is his first name?
His name is Michael Duncan.
Michael,
Yeah,
and his last name?
Duncan.
Michael Duncan.
Yeah.
All right. So here's what I got a little exercise for you. Okay. Can you reach out to Michael and ask him if he knows a decent realtor in Cleveland, uh, who investment realtor who can help you and me search for a duplex or a triplex in Cleveland to buy?
I can ask him, but I actually know friends. I have friends there, so I can
Yeah,
ask them as well.
whether it's Michael or anybody else, you have contacts in Cleveland. Cleveland has potential, right?
Hmm.
And they have a pretty good basketball team too.
Yeah, they're pretty good. My uncle, my other uncle, actually used to coach the Cleveland Cavaliers. He coaches the Sacramento Kings right now. So I lived with him when we're in California. He was coaching the Lakers for a year. I lived
Incredible.
with him there. Yeah, so he's also a connect. And probably, we didn't talk about the investor, but he's probably a potential investor.
Well, yeah. Well, the Cavs have a really good team. I like their team. The
Yeah.
I really think is coming too is Minnesota.
Oh, yeah, Minnesota's good.
I like those guys. All right.
Yeah, I thought they were gonna win it.
I don't know. The Celtics they were pretty dominant, and they had that big, tall, white guy who was pretty good too. What's his name? Porzingis?
Yeah, Porzingis, but he was hurt most of the playoffs.
Hurt most of the time, but when he played, he was pretty good. Anyway, so reach out to your friends in Cleveland. Say, uh, you need to find though an investment realtor in Cleveland. All right. Um, uh, and I don't have to tell you this, and I'm sorry I'm going to mention it, but you need to find somebody that will treat you properly. Do you understand what I'm getting at? I apologize for saying it. Just that some realtors are are difficult, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
Some are better than others.
Yeah, you just
They're
want,
not all created equal. Yeah.
like, as you know, in Canada, whether you're white or black or whatever, people don't, at least in my experience, don't really care. Um,
Hmm.
but in the United States, it's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, I lived there for a bit, so I understand.
I know that. So did I. I lived in California for many years. I lived in Texas. I spent time in Boston, and it's a different world, right? You know, I understand the struggles, and don't forget, I coach a lot of people in the States, and it's there are literally two societies. They're separate. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is. So you want to find an investment realtor who is going to work in your best interest, right? And that's going to require some research on your part. You find a good realtor, and then he or she can put you on an automatic search. I think we talked about this before. So every duplex or every triplex in areas that you're interested in will come your way. One more thing I have to mention to you as well. Uh, you have to look for property in a low crime area. Okay, again, it's a little bit different investing in the United States. Um, I have clients in Michigan, close to Detroit, and some investing in downtown Detroit, and their downtown Detroit, believe it or not, is coming back. It is. It is finally coming back. You couldn't have said that at any time in the last 60 or 70 years, but it's finally coming back. But you have to know the neighborhood crime statistics. All right, Nirra, you cannot invest in high crime areas. All right.
Yeah, I know the area pretty well. Like I said, I grew up there. I
I,
didn't grow up there, but I lived there for some years. But I
and
understand.
I'm uncomfortable saying it to you because I respect you, but I want you to be successful. That's part of my job. So let's find a great duplex. You're going to find they're much, much cheaper. The ROIs will be much better. And we're going to do a lot more animation in Cleveland than we can do in Toronto. I'm really excited about this. Now I have to go. I've got somebody else waiting for me now. I want to wish you all the best in the Olympics. I'm counting on a medal. I don't care what color it is. And I mean it. I want you to get on an automatic search for Cleveland and have your realtor put me on that too, so I can see everything you're seeing. Okay.
Hmm.
All
Okay,
he
thank you.
all he or she has to do is put my email address in, and your email address will see the same thing. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm cheering for you. Okay. Look, I'm doing it already. All right.
Yes.
I'll see you later.
So yeah.